I'm thrilled to introduce our final keynote speaker of the event, a man that needs little introduction at the New York Stock Exchange. A native New Yorker, Dick Grasso started his New York Stock Exchange career at age 16 as a clerk on the floor of the exchange. Working his way up the ranks, Mr. Grasso presided as chairman and CEO of the New York Stock Exchange from the early 90s till 2003, notably overseeing and restoring operations after the 9/11 attacks. Since stepping down from the New York Stock Exchange, Mr. Grasso has continued his efforts starting new business ventures and helping others grow theirs. Most recently, Mr. Grasso has assumed a role on the board of Route 9B. Who better to close out the first annual Cyber Investing Summit than a man with a legendary understanding of financial markets and the critical importance of cybersecurity on many levels? It is my pleasure to welcome back to the New York Stock Exchange, Dick Grasso.
Andrew, this is a true delight. The last time I was officially speaking in this building, I was fired 13 years ago. So it's much nicer to be in this role. You know, I'm very fortunate, as Andrew said. I'm an advisory board member at Route 9B, so that's my Surgeon General's warning to this audience. I do have a hometown favorite. But the field that you've been talking about today, cybersecurity, is one that I have a great interest in because my dear friend of more than, well, almost 3 decades, the great leader who brought PaineWebber back from the abyss and who chaired UBS here in America, Joe Grasso, is chair of Route 9B, the parent company, and the company that's publicly traded. When Joe asked me to get involved, it was easy to say yes because Joe has been one of the great leaders in financial services. And when you look at the composition of Joe's advisory board, the former head of Secret Service, Lou Milletti, the former head of the FBI and once head of the CIA, Judge Webster. Easy to be intrigued by people like that. But today's conference is about cyber investing. And cyber investing is, I would venture, not even in the first inning of this ball game. I look back at my career on Wall Street long before technology played a role, and then the introduction of technology in the late 1960s throughout the late 1970s. And there was one common denominator that separated the haves from the fakers, okay, and that was people, great people with technology. In cyber, and in the world of cybersecurity, you will hear from a lot of vendors, okay, and a lot of people who have lots of great technology that worked last year and last decade and perhaps decades ago. But it's really the combination of people and technology that will win the cyber war. And this is, in my estimation, no less than a cyber war. A war against capitalism. America will never lose a war where there are bombs dropped, missiles launched, or boots on the ground. But America, and particularly corporate America, runs the risk of losing a war that will be launched in cyberspace. So I would encourage those of you who are in the world of investing in the cyber sector to look at not just product, but people. And I think the war of cyber can only be won when you look at ventures and organizations that have people that have been on the other side of the wall, people who have been in black ops, because that's what this is going to functionally turn down to. The functional, if you will, war that we will fight. Consider this: America without consumer access to their bank accounts, America without electricity, America without air traffic controllers who can talk to the 50,000 planes that are in the air at any given moment in time. That's what you're looking at. How many in this room, those of you who are investors, recall the name computing, tabulating, and recording? Yeah, only one person, because he worked for IBM. How many recall the name Haloid? 2. A former IBMer and a man who understood Xerox was going to be a way of life, a generic in our world. How many were there in 1996 when Jimmy Clark brought Netscape public? Okay, we're getting warmer, okay? Jimmy Clark said to me before he took it public, and I had done one of his other companies, you have to take this company on the New York Stock Exchange. And I said, Jimmy, I'm a magician, but I'm not that good. Not only don't you have earnings, you don't have revenues. You're a concept, Jimmy. He said, I know, but when we take it public, it's going to be special. And special it was. Day one, it had a market cap of $1 billion, not a dime's worth of revenues. It broke my heart to see it with a 4-character ticker symbol. I was thrilled when Facebook went public because it had a 2-character ticker symbol. Wrong market, okay, but a 2-character ticker symbol. Those of you who are old enough to remember, 4s went to what I called the minor league. All right, 3s, 2s, and 1s came here, the heart of capitalism. If this place had any brains in 1970, and a lot of people question whether it did, it would have listed Intel when doctors Noyce, Moore, and Grove, who all came out of a listed company, wanted to do that. But we were so sophisticated at the time that we said, if you're going public, go public somewhere else. And then the few, the washed, okay, the proud. I'm not talking about the Marines. I'm talking about companies that develop a track record, can then move over to the New York Stock Exchange. Had we been smart enough when Intel went public, the book of technology companies going public would have only come to one place, this place. Those of you who are in the investment world, it's very simple when you look at cyber investment opportunity. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And I would say to you, there are a lot of companies out there today that you will not hear from a year from now, 5 years from now, and certainly 10 years from now. It is people and technology, and I'll step away from my background in financial services and take a look at the model in the airline business. All right, in the airline business, you automate everything that you possibly can. Baggage handling, scheduling, meal service, travel schedules, if you will, of both the consumer and the line itself. But there's one thing you never reduce to Microsoft Flyer 11, and that's the cockpit, okay? Because in the cockpit, when people walk aboard those airplanes, they want to see 2 live bodies or 3 live bodies who have the same objective the consumer walking onto that airplane does, and that is a safe landing at LAX or at Heathrow or wherever you're going. You don't want the thought that some program is going to take us from JFK to LAX or to Heathrow. You want live people in that cockpit. That's what cyber, I believe, is going to become, cybersecurity. A combination of people and technology. In my world, the people and technology that once were on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange provided the best of best in terms of executional opportunity. In the cyber investment world, in the cybersecurity world, in the world of a war from city, state, and if you will, organizations sponsored by governments, You're going to want the best people and the best technology. I'll venture a guess that no more than 5 years from now, just as today we take as commonplace independent audit, nominating, and compensation committees, there are going to be regulatory requirements calling for independent committees of boards of publicly held companies that specialize in cybersecurity. Has to happen. I look back to the Lockheed scandal in the early 1970s, created the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You're going to have, a couple of years from now, a requirement, be it from the SEC, be it, if you will, from the best practices standings of committees in the professional area, a need for a board-level committee that focuses just on the issue this conference has been all about. My own experience will tell me, and I hope will forewarn, that we don't wake up one day to a country that doesn't have an electricity grid, doesn't have an air traffic control system that works, doesn't have, if you will, consumers with a blocked access to bank accounts, to their credit cards. That's what we're facing. That's what this conference is about. That's what the companies you've heard from today are all trying to pursue, a world that insulates America from a war that won't be fought with missiles, bombs, and boots, but will be fought in the cyber, if you will, the cyber that can sit right here in Lower Manhattan and bounce off websites in 50 different parts of the world so that the traditional private sector detectors of those, if you will, miscreants will not be able to find them. I'm a great believer that people and technology made this institution different. People and technology will make cyber warfare different. I told you right at the outset, my home court is at Route 9B. I love listening. Sometimes they scare me to death to some of the professionals at that company because they came from the other side of the wall. And there are many in so many of the companies you've heard from today that have similar backgrounds. That's what will determine and define the winners. Those of you who will invest, all right, look back 5 years from now, and I think you will see. It was the people, it was the technology, it was the ability not to simply respond, but to proactively seek, identify, and destroy those who were trying to corrupt systems. It is a challenge to all of you, all right, those who are providers, those who are investors, and clearly to the world, the broader world of cyber. And it's going to be a very exciting time. There will be players and there will be fakers, not unlike every new, if you will, horizon you faced as investors. Choose wisely. Choose the best people with the best technology and a proactive approach. I'm told by the conference organizers that I'm the only thing standing between this group and cocktails on the floor of the exchange. A dangerous place to be. All right? But I'll happily take a question or two. What I will not talk about are my 5 favorite stocks for the next 3 years, okay? Because I have a track record that only Joe Grasso can attest to. I have made, as an investor, a small fortune. Sadly, I started with a large one. Thank you very much for having me today. If you have a question or two, I'll be happy to try and answer it. If not, we'll all adjourn to the capital of capital, 7 floors beneath us, and you'll be able to see some of the great names and some of the great technologies that this institution has provided. Questions?
I'd also like to say that we have about 25 minutes before cocktails, so keep the questions coming.
Yes, ma'am.
The risk that we understand, you've described so eloquently. Share with us what you can about
How companies you've seen who are doing a good job of being resilient, communities that you've seen, agencies that you've seen. I mean, it's a piecemeal process. I've had the thought for years that rural post offices would be really good outposts of redundancy in backup grids and various things. The contingency planning that everybody ought to be doing, and most people are, requires people to think that through the painful possibilities as well. So share with us your journey down that road.
Well, you know, there are so many embryonic companies in this business, okay? And there are a number of very, very large defense contractors with organizations within their groups that are in the space. I don't want to single out one or two or three. I just want you as an investor, okay, to look at the backgrounds of the people that are in the space and the technologies they're deploying, and if you will, the strategies that they articulate to their customer base. This is, I say, not even the first inning in this, if you will, investment space. I think I would be premature if I said it were anything less than the pregame show. I mean, we have yet to see, all right, the full force, whether it's coming out of Eastern Europe, whether it's coming out of, you know, some of the nation states that are allegedly allies, if not allies, not enemies of the United States. I think we fight a different war today, and the good news is, perhaps good news for the private sector, but not such a good message to our government. A lot of the best and brightest in our governmental agencies are coming out of those agencies. Look at the backgrounds of some of the people that you've heard from today. All right, these are folks that are either inspired by the challenge of, if you will, providing security to our nation, or are disgusted by the Snowden affair, okay, who are willing to come out into the private sector and help. And I think that in that latter case, a lot of the folks that you will see are really upset at how our government reacted and how Snowden has been able to be, if you will, held up as a hero in parts of the world. That creates the opportunity for companies in the private sector to really tap the best and brightest. Because the war that you're going to face in cyber is one that the private sector has never faced. But operators on the other side of the wall faced throughout their careers in the military or in those agencies. And that's, I think, the good news for the opportunity as you sort through the, and again, don't discount the small startups, because some of the small startups have great people who have joined the private sector for the first time in their lives, having spent virtually all of their careers on the other side of the governmental wall. Another question.
Thank you, sir, for your service, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question about time. And given high-frequency trading and straight-through processing and the dependence upon time of the markets in general, do you have confidence that the countries of the world, especially the G8, can maintain control or safety and soundness of time from manipulation by hackers?
The hackers that we've identified in all of these high-profile cases have one common denominator, okay? these are not warlocks sitting in their grandmother's basement, okay, who are playing, if you will, cute computer games. These are very sophisticated, in many cases, state-sponsored operators who have access to technologies that are clearly of military grade, which means we need in the private sector, and I'll come back to my industry. No one's going to attempt to hack a brokerage firm directly. I mean, they will, okay? But the more effective way of inflicting enormous damage on financial services is to go through the back end of the securities chain, the clearance, comparison, and settlement cycles, okay? And go through those banks that are in that loop, okay? And through those loops, okay, you can get to, the 80 million investors in this country and around the world. Do we have a level of sophistication in the private sector? It's growing. As I said to the earlier question, a lot of operators who were on the governmental side of the wall are now in the private sector. And that's where I think the great, if you will, defense strategies will develop. But industries, and I'll stay with the securities industry. The securities industry has got to be proactive in seeking out the types of talent that exist, that have come from the government side, and deploying that talent. In many cases, a lot of these young men and young women are patriots who are more concerned about protecting our way of life than they are necessarily at selling a product or selling, if you will, the services of a company. Think about, I look at one of the companies that I've been involved with that is an active trading, if you will, algorithmic company. It trades 6 million times a day. 6 million times a day. In my best day here at 11 Wall Street, we traded about 2 million trades. So one small entity with 150 people trading 6 million times a day. How many more of those shops are out there? And what kinds of mischief can the hackers and, if you will, the evil people out there who are just looking to destroy our capitalist system, what can they do? The good news is we've got a lot of wonderful young minds coming out of government who are able to deal proactively in a hunt, identify, and destroy, if you will, mentality to those types of threats. I'll take one more, and then you've got cocktails on the greatest trading floor on earth. I'm sorry, Joseph? Mm-hmm.
Sorry, was there a question up here?
If none, Joe, you want to raise a question?
I think that one of the challenges is that we need to train our traditional CTOs and CISOs who were never really trained in cyber. So that's
Joe makes an
important
excellent point. Training, if you will, and particularly call it military-grade training by those who have been on the other side of the wall. For those in our industry that have never been exposed to the types of threats that governments can produce, Joe makes a point about the training opportunities for people in our business, be it in financial services or any consumer business that's the subject of a potential hack. And that's going to be key. And there are lots of terrific companies out there. Joe has one in mind. I won't mention it, okay? But you can pretty well guess what it is. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for having me. Enjoy your evening on the trading floor.